Released after Final Fantasy VII, Crisis Core was created to build on the Zack Fair flashbacks from the original game, and to show how Cloud fit into the picture and became who he was. And maybe I'm alone on this, or at least I'm one who dares to admit it, but when I finished playing the original Final Fantasy VII as a teenager, I was quite confused as to who was a clone of what, and when they became clones, and how and why they were clones of the clones of the clones of Attack of the Clones, blah, 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 blah. So playing Crisis Core was actually a way to fill in some of the gaps in the original Final Fantasy VII flashback scenes. Only released on PSP, you play as Zack Fair, and you get to play through years of key moments like earning his first class soldier rank, acquiring the Buster Sword, and seeing Sephiroth go from war hero to insane murderous maniac. You see Zack's budding romance with Aerith, and later befriend Cloud, this wussy grunt who's easily plagued by motion sickness, who isn't even close to soldier rank. We get to see how the two guys individually attempt to stop Sephiroth from taking Genova and destroying the planet, ultimately leading to a true act of heroism from the low-ranking Cloud, where he sacrifices himself to throw Sephiroth to his supposed death, where he actually doesn't die. And then we see how Zack and Cloud were carried off and injected with Genova cells in experiments. Something that barely apparently affected Zack because he's a soldier, but potentially both saves regular human Cloud's life and simultaneously turns him into this messed up vegetable. And then from there, Cloud pretty much spends the rest of the game unconscious, with Zack carrying him around trying to save both of their lives as fugitives venturing back to Midgar under pursuit of Shinra. The game ends just outside the Midgar walls, where this massive Shinra army catches up to them, and then Zack loses his life protecting Cloud. Just as Zack lays there dying, Cloud finally finds the strength to stand, and Zack tells him that Cloud will now be Zack's living legacy. Cloud takes up the Buster Sword and ventures into Midgar, where he'll hire on with Avalanche to help blow up the first Mako reactor at the start of Final Fantasy VII, thinking that Zack's past is actually a part of his past. Okay, a few thoughts about Crisis Core. I honestly wasn't stoked to play through it because I had assumed that if it was a good game, I would have either heard more about it or at least it would have been released on something other than a single handheld console. But I gave it a try anyway, and I'm glad I did. It's not perfect. The voice acting is bad.
Oh, you.
Though that was probably more of the fault of the time it was developed than the actors in this case. And the dialogue and parts of the plot are not written very well.
No story is not worth hearing.
With virtually no NPCs, the scenes also feel just about as empty as the original Final Fantasy VII. And while story moments surrounding Zack, Cloud, Aerith, and Sephiroth are really interesting and they make the game worth playing, other plot lines are just terrible. For instance, much of the story surrounds a trio of skilled friends in Soldier. Sephiroth, Genesis, and then Zack's mentor Angeal, who I think is ridiculously named to lean too far into this one-winged angel concept. Sephiroth is really interesting, but the game never gives a reason to emotionally invest in Angeal or Genesis. Both of them defect from Soldier toward the beginning of the game, and then they wreak havoc across the land by creating a bunch of weird clone people and clone monsters. Yes, more clones. Everyone's cloning each other and pretending to be clones of other people, and some have degenerating tissue, but others don't. None of it is terribly clear. Even the director of Soldier, clearly a beta version of Ignis Scientia, turns into a clone of a clone of a clone, I don't know. And then this Genesis guy, who looks more like a pretty girl, speaks in this Shakespeare wannabe prose from the apparently famous play Loveless that we see advertised on the Sector 8 theater in Final Fantasy VII.
Even if the morrow is barren of promises, nothing shall forestall my return.
Talk like a normal person! These plots are hard enough to figure out without your attempts at fantastical old English. And to top it off, the backstory behind the Buster Sword is revealed to be a real letdown.
That sword represents our family's honor. I see.
While the combat is basically just button mashing, top with slot machine gambling at random moments to pump you up with extra HP or summons, it's actually kind of fun to play. But the best parts about the game were the interactions with the characters we know from Final Fantasy VII. Seeing how Cloud and Zack got to know each other is just too much fun, and inarguably the best part about Crisis Core.
Cloud.
You also interact with Tifa and her weird cowgirl outfit, Yuffie as a little girl if you play some of the side missions, and then you even come across Vincent sleeping in his coffin. And spending time with Sephiroth before he flips a gasket and goes sociopathic is fascinating, and it adds this layer of depth to his character. So that stuff is all delightful nerd candy for fans. Though, unfortunately, Aerith in Crisis Core completely lacks the spark she has in other games. She both talks and she runs like this prissy wuss.
I planted some outside my house, too.
And she even complains about the flower cart that Zack spends forever building for her.
Not quite what I expected.
Really? I think it's fine. It's all about the flowers anyway.
I want a nicer one.
Stop being so picky.
A tiny little wish. That's all.
You live in the slums and hang out in a dilapidated church. Be grateful for your cart. And then there's Zack. While his dialogue is usually lame, Zack is actually a pretty likable and heroic character.
Hello to you too!
Unlike Cloud, who we know as being stoic and cocky about his supposed soldier skills, Zack is open and fun-loving and authentically able to kick the crap out of everyone. As cheesy as it is, when you see Zack trying to talk down his opponents before he fights them, carry and defend an unconscious Cloud for months, and then face down an entire army knowing he would probably be killed trying to protect his friend, you start to wish that there were a lot more people like him in real life.
The price of freedom is steep.
To sum up Crisis Core, I actually had a lot more fun with that game than I ever expected, so it gets a thumbs up from me.
Embrace your dreams.
I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the short anime film Last Order, which basically consists of bloodier snippets of the Crisis Core story surrounding Zack and Cloud. It doesn't introduce much different content, except that it does show Shinra taking the unconscious Zack and Cloud into the Shinra Mansion basement to be experimented upon, as well as a few other small details. One differentiation is that it shows Sephiroth purposefully jump off the ledge with Genova's head, rather than being thrown off by a heroic Cloud. Something that seems to contradict all the other games and lore, and honestly isn't nearly as impactful in my opinion. So we'll just have to see how future remake episodes handle that one.